More than 30 leading refugee and asylum seeker charities have called on the government to give local authorities more power over accommodation for those seeking sanctuary in the UK. Around £4 billion of government contracts to provide housing to asylum seekers from September 2019 was put out for tender in November. The closing date for bids is the 17th of December. In October, the Refugee Council said the current system, in which G4S and Serco manage the majority of asylum seeker housing, routinely dumped traumatized people into squalid, unsafe, slum housing conditions. In an open letter to the Home Secretary, 33 organizations asked that local authorities be given the role of providing independent oversight of housing in their areas. Responsibility for housing people seeking asylum in the UK was taken away from local authorities in 2012 when contracts to provide the service were given to G4S, Serco and Clearspriggs. At £4 billion of public money, it is one of the UK government's largest contracts, the letter reads. As agencies working to support refugee integration across the UK, we are concerned that these public funds may once again go exclusively to private sector companies, with little or none of that money directed to support local government and the local communities where refugees are housed. A safe, secure home is a necessity for people seeking refugee protection in the UK. As most people arrive here exhausted and destitute, it is right, and indeed a legal obligation, that the government provides housing to people in need as a public service. The letter's signatories, who include the CEOs of the British Refugee Council, the Scottish Refugee Council and Refugee Action, asked the Home Secretary to give councils a role overseeing how asylum housing is planned, procured, implemented and formally scrutinised in their areas. The letter also calls for local authorities and communities to be fairly and fully financially resourced to ensure they can manage the costs of accommodating asylum seekers. In January this year, the Home Affairs Select Committee produced a report which branded conditions in asylum housing disgraceful after hearing evidence of widespread infestations of mice, rats and bedbugs. A Home Office response to the Select Committee report, issued in November, claimed it had implemented improvements that met many of the MP's criticisms. In their letter, the charities said they were alarmed that the government had not engaged substantively with this report and the critical evidence made to it. Speaking on Thursday at a Westminster Hall debate on the Home Office response to the report, MP Yvette Cooper urged the government to recognise that some accommodation for asylum seekers was not fit for habitation. If we don't recognise the problems that occurred as part of the last contract, how can we be sure that these issues will be recognised in the new contracts and the new system, she said. Immigration Minister Brandon Lewis, representing the government in the debate, said they were committed to ensuring destitute asylum seekers were accommodated in safe, secure and suitable accommodation. He insisted the vast majority of the housing provided was a good standard,